another episode of That's Sew Wilma. And this episode, we're actually going to be sewing. I'm so serious. We are going to be making a hat. It's going to be very easy and fraught with meaning. And I'm caught up in something down here. It's already going badly. This is all the things you're going to need. You're going to need some paper, a scrap of paper. Here's the thing. When making a hat is like making a stew. I call making almost any accessory like a fridge cleaner in the world of fashion because you don't need a lot of it, a lot of materials. You can use scraps. Like for instance, for this hat, we're going to be using scraps of fabric that I've used for other things. And here's my rule of thumb. If it's bigger than your hand, keep it. You never know. Like, look at this long strip right here. Like, you'd think, well, what the heck would I use? You'd use it for trim on a hat. You could use this for a binding on a pair of gloves. There's a lot of really good reason to keep scraps of fabric. When do you throw them out? Probably never. You'll probably be buried under them and found 3 weeks later once people complain about the smell. If you do it once a year, I like to Sophie's Choice my scraps. I like to make the hard calls. Because if you have every good intention to keep something, to make something with, and it's a year later and you still haven't made it, guess who's not making that? You. So, what you're going to need for this hat is you're going to need some paper. I just use scrap. I buy craft paper at the dollar store. It comes on a roll. I use this to make patterns. It's very easy. And anything big like this, I definitely keep because, well, you can make a hat pattern with it. You're also going to need craft foam. I get this from the dollar store. Don't spend a lot of money on it. If you're buying stuff somewhere that's not the dollar store, like you've got Michael's money to burn, well then good for you. They have lovely foam at Michael's. It's very expensive. I'm okay with this. In fact, everything that I buy to make my hats is from the dollar store. Something else you're going to need that you can get at the dollar store is floral wire or craft wire. It's just very thin, you know, a little. This one thing I think cost $1. I've had it a year, and I use it all the time. It's still not empty. If you don't have access to craft wire, pipe cleaners are fine. Seriously, like anything with a wire in it is what you're going to need. You're also going to need scissors. The other thing that we're going to need for this hat is an accent piece. Now, I have this. I know it looks rude. It's like an angry toilet brush or something. But this, somebody gave me this. It's a beautiful feather, and it's wired. It's got a wire in it, so it does lovely things. And I thought, oh, what a fabulous thing to put on a hat. I mean, not like that. That would be crazy. But I thought it would be funny. I thought it would be fabulous to make like it come out of something. So this is my inspiration for this hat. Now, you don't need a feather on a wire to make a hat. Like sometimes, you know, when you're in the dollar store and you see like kids things and there's stuff like that on them, these are great things to make with hats. This hat here is this, except that the base on it with all the rhinestones, well, it looks like rhinestones, it's just plastic. I literally hot glue gunned clear rhinestones to a base that I covered in black fabric and then stuck this on it. That's how I made that hat. The other thing that I found helpful for this case, sometimes you're just making a hat. Sometimes you have a structure, you're making, you know, it's very clear what it is. For this hat, I wasn't sure what I wanted, so I got the wig that I was going to wear the hat with. I left a space in the do for a hat. A lot of like hats will need to be placed in wigs that way, if you're, or even into hairdos, depending on the hat. You know, some of them, like this one here, this is the first hat I ever bought. It comes with a little chin strappy thing, so you can put it on the back of your head or underneath. It's things like that. But for the wigs, I just pin them right to the wigs. Because who am I fooling? Nobody. The other thing you're going to need is a sewing machine. You're going to need thread that goes with the fabric. It doesn't have to match it. It doesn't have to be the same. It can be a contrasting that is a feature then. But it's up to you, whatever you want to do as far as thread goes. But you'll need your sewing machine and pins. It's always good to have a seam ripper as well, just in case you make a mistake. It just helps to cut those threads out and get you back on track quicker. Also, make sure you have a couple of needles, more than just the one in the machine, in case you have a mistake. Because we're going to be sewing with some craft wire, and if you pin stuff, you'll be going near or over pins, and so nobody wants a needle to break, but God help you. If you break that needle and you realize that's the only needle you had, it's always better to prolong the project a day and get more needles, get those things. Make sure you have everything, because then you just do it and it's done. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to use a piece of paper. Now, this is how exact it is. I wanted just a bit of a square of paper, so I'm just going to tear that. And I wanted to do like a calla lily. Like, you know, a calla lily? I know I keep saying calla lily like it explains it, but I thought if it keeps, and it fell into the, and this came, and ooh, and that's what got me excited. So then what I did was literally, I didn't need it this big, but I put I figured, okay, I want it to be about this big. But having everything ready, and I have nothing here. I'm just going to cut it there. I'm going to give it a bit of a swoop. And then this will be the opening of the hat. It's going to go on like that. But now I want to take a lot of this bulk out of it too, because we don't need all of this. I'd like this to be really like a trumpet of a calla lily. So I'm going to narrow this down. I'm taking a lot of this bulk out. And I'd like it to land pretty close to the head back here. I want it to literally, so what I'm wanting to do is then I will sew this whole thing together. Do you see how it's making a tube now? And I'll have it on the head, and we'll stick that feather in it. And I know it looks crap right now, but that's how we're going to start. So once you get a pattern the way you like it, and I like it to be symmetrical, so I always, once I do it, I fold it and then make sure all the edges are the same. And then that way there's no question. And then what you do is you cut this out. You can trace this directly on the foam. You need one in the foam, and then you're going to need two in the fabric. You're going to need 2 layers of the fabric, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be completely covering this hat inside and out. It'll have this fabric on the inside and on the outside. You'll also need to get some trim. Basically what I did, it's up to you how wide you want your trim. If you want it to be a 1/4 inch, then you have to cut it 4 times that, so it has to be 1 inch, because then you sew it at 1/4, we're folding it over and then folding it again, then catching on the other side, so it'll be 4 folds at 1/4, which will make a whole inch worth of fabric. So I have a strip right there. This will be perfect for me to do the wrap in, and I have my feather. I think we're good to go. So let's start. What we're going to do is these edges, we are going to zigzag together very carefully on the machine. Now this is a zigzag machine, so I'm going to put it to its widest zigzag. And I'm going to make it a very narrow stitch, because I really want these things to hold. But this is craft foam. This might tear. This is always a fussy thing. But all you have to do, literally, let me get in here close for you. Oh, look at that. All right. If you were any closer, you'd be in my lap. So here are the 2 sides of this pattern, and I'm putting them literally up against each other, just a little, as they go through the presser foot here, and you'll see the needle. I'm going to do this by hand. So the needle's crossing over. It's going in. Now that's a little farther than I want it to go, so I'm just going to just put it there. And that's catching in, and now it's coming across. Now it's not feeding to, because this is, again, it's very, there's not a lot of fabric under that foot there. So I'm just going to start. This is the thing about the tails, the thread tails, is I like to use them to hold on to stuff and kind of tell it what it needs to do. Sometimes these things forget that they have jobs, these bits of fabric. You're supposed to go through here and let my zigzag catch. Now, if it doesn't go through evenly, Every once in a while, just every couple, you want to maybe lift the presser foot and just readjust it. This is all going to be inside the hat. You are never going to see any of this. This could be the ugliest bit of sewing in the world, and no one is going to be able to read you for it. Maybe a blind person might run their hand along the seam and go, "Oh, girl, that's rough." But now, I'm here, let me get this down. So as I'm bringing this through, these two seams, you can see it here, they start to pull away because they're curved. Now, unfortunately, you can't see this because this is starting to, the rest of the hat, but I'll hold this down as much as I can. But I'm just holding them together and letting the zigzag grab either side of where these two pieces of foam meet. And I'm just going in as far as I can. It doesn't have to go all the way in. Like, this is, at some point, this is going to become impossible for the machine. And sometimes we just have to kind of accept defeat. But if you can get in there as far as you can. And once you get to that point that that's as far, I can't possibly get the presser foot down here anymore, then just back stitch on your machine a couple of times. But there you go. So that's the zigzag. Now, as you can see, we have, you know, a good 2-3 inches still, but that's on the inside of the hat. We're going to close that by hand. So this is now our hat form. Look at that. And now it's time to sew. Okay, so here is our fabric piece. We cut this from our pattern piece that we cut from the paper that we used to sculpt the hat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the two open edges. We're cutting along that same seam that we just zigzagged closed on the foam piece. And as you can see, just in here, I'm going to use a pin. Maybe you can see better with if I use the pin. In the middle right here is like an oblong window through the presser foot. This allows the needle to go back and forth, zigzag. So we're just running the edge along the inside window of that foot, and we're holding everything together. Now you could pin this. It's not necessary. I mean, the fabric is kind of close to the needle, and you do want to make sure you catch both sides, but it's not vital that it's perfect or even. And then I backstitched, I'm trimming, and then the thing we do is we just have a quick look and see that the whole thing caught. I like to just open it up. And so there, that's perfect. And then you repeat with the other side. My stitch width is not, because this is a small project, normally you would stitch at a 3. I'm doing just at a 2. So I'm putting the fabric on the end of my finger. I know it's dirty. And I'm going to stick this, you heard me, into my form so I can grab that. Now, as you can see, we've left this open. This is the end of our form. Let me move this back. We don't need this right here right now. So this is the hat. It's going to be going on the head this way. So this seam is going to go the whole way along here. So what I like to do, just to start, is I'm going to take this, I'm going to take a pin, and I've matched the seam that I sewed on the fabric with the zigzagged seam we created on the foam, and I'm just going to pin it there. And then what I like to do, I eyeball. You don't need to be crazy here. This is, again, this is not precision. This is not couturier suit making. This is a hat. So you're really, be flexible with your ideas. You want to be able to, I always say this, if the hat tells you what it wants to do, don't fight the hat. If the fabric says we're pleating here, or we need to dart there, that's where it needs to dart. Don't fight the fabric, don't fight the hat. So what I'm doing now is I'm just literally pinning this fabric around the edge of our hat form. This way, it's just secure. I don't have to think about it. There doesn't have to be a lot of pins. Also, you don't need to make this snug, but I do like to make sure that the seam down the both the fabric and the foam match. So what I'll do is I'll just, even down to here where the hole is, I'll pull the fabric out, and there's the seam. So I'll put my finger in behind, and I'll just stick another pin here, and then that way, just for now, I know that my seam is running straight down the center. And then I continue. I'm not pulling. The thing with this foam is not very stiff. It's very, very easily collapsed. So I like to make sure the fabric's flat against it, but not taut. I don't want it to be too snug, because if it's too snug, it'll curl the foam. Now, don't get me wrong. Curled foam has its place, but this hat isn't one of them. So we left this end of the hat open because the machine wouldn't fit, but also this makes it easy for us to be able to align the seam to the hat base. Now, I took this pin out so I could pull this. You can feel it even in here. Just give it a little bit of a tug, not too hard, but you can feel everything smooth out. And then what I do is I put the edge of this fabric right on that edge of that foam right there. You see? And then I bring the other end up so it's a sandwich. It's a foam sandwich. Ooh, sandwich. And so literally, I take the thread and I just go through it. It's wrapping around on it's coming down on a diagonal when I do it like this. Let me get right in there. So I'm going to just go straight through. I'm not going that far in. 1/4 of an inch, half a centimeter, and then I'm pulling it through, not too tight because this foam will rip, and then I'm going down again, as far down. Now, keep in mind this fabric's got, as I said, those little heat transfer sequins, so sometimes your needle will be pushing through a little bit of plastic, and it just gets a little fussy. But again, don't make this too much of a project. See, now that stitch is a little too low. That one, you want to try and keep them all about the same depth, not too far. As you can see from the zigzag stitches, they come in about that much. And you're literally just coming around. They don't have to be too close. This one's a little far, but that's not too bad. Keep in mind, this will all be covered. When you get to the end, you're just going to come back on itself a little. This is just back tacking. What this is going to do is create like a crosshatch look on the front. Do you see? It just makes the end a little more secure, but it also gives you just some room to come back. And then what I do is I come under that stitch there. You can't really tie a knot in the foam because it'll rip. So I come under that stitch here. Let me just pull this back. So I've come under that stitch there, and then I come back and around this way, the needle through the loop, and I'm going to do it again. This knot doesn't have to be secure, like extra strong, because it's inside a hat, but it still needs to be closed. So there you go. Now we've closed the form, and then what you can do is literally go along here and press it with your thumb, and it'll more or less lie flat. Not necessarily as flat as there, but this is also going to be at the back of the hat. This is going to be, no one's seeing that anyway, so even if it comes off a little lumpy, it's not going to be the worst thing you've ever seen. And now the hat starts to come together. Are you still with me? Maybe we need to stiffen our resolve. I always like to have tea when I'm sewing. And by tea, I mean whiskey. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's not good to drink and operate heavy machinery. So if you can't lift your sewing machine, don't drink. Seriously. Okay, so now we take the other piece and we are going to cover the hat form. So the first thing we need to do is turn this inside out. And again, you stick your finger into it. This is how I do it anyway. You put your finger all the way in, and then you like make the OK sign, and then pull it around. It should more or less go all the way through. And if it doesn't, because it, you know, it's pointier than your finger, take a pin, and you can literally just stick it into like it's like an innie belly button and you're trying to make it an outie. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to pull this out as much as you can because it'll mean just less fabric on the inside of that seam. All right, so then we take this, we stick this over here, and again, we want to make sure that this lines up with that seam. So we're just going to stick this hat form inside, making sure that the seam at the top is as centered as possible. And then literally you're just going to pull all of this stuff down. Now, because we already have pins and stuff at the edge, what we do is we just make sure that our fabric is lined up as much as it can be. Don't stretch this. Again, I can't stretch. Pull it snug, but don't make this too tight. If it becomes too tight, what'll happen is the fabric will start to pull it, and you don't want that. So you just make sure that this is as far down onto that point as possible, and then you just smooth the fabric up to the edge. We got that pin right there, and then we just pin both sides together. And you just go the whole way around the hat. I go over to the other side right away just to get that seam handled. That's the second place I like to go, just to make sure it's good. Just to make sure it's good. And then we just pin those two. That's the front and the back. We just pin them. And then we just go the whole way around. And again, you just want to ease this. You don't want to be a bully about it. Let the fabric tell you what it wants to do. If you have more somewhere than you should, maybe you have more in one spot than on the other side, that's okay. We're going to hide all this, and it's going to be fabulous. And there's always going to be some little imperfection or hiccup. We're dealing with three-dimensional shapes. Some are going inside, some are covering them. So they're going to take up more and space or less space. So you're going to have more or less fabric. So there will always be trimming. There will always be finessing. This is all part of it. This is the artistry of millinery. Oh. Woo! I was getting grand there for a minute. This is more or less it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch all the way around to hold all of this in, because this is too much. You see there's too much fabric and stuff. So literally leaving the pins where they are, and people will tell you don't sew over pins, do sew over pins, do what you want. My attitude is, how much do you like to pay for your sewing machine repairs? Do you like to do it every 2 months, or do you like to do it once a year? So my attitude is, don't run over your pins. If you can avoid it, don't do it. Now, the hard thing with this is we're going to be stitching. Do you see how some of this is further over than others? This is how it's going to be. So what we're going to do is, it's easier to sew from the inside of this cup. To get it under here, it's going to be easier for me to sew it this way. If I were sewing it this way, it would be really hard, especially at this angle, to get. I could do it, but it would be fussy. So we're going to do it this way because this is just easy. We're going to start at the tip because there's the most going on there. I'm going to bring this needle around to the front and stick it just across that way so I can see it. I like to bring all the pins to the side I'm working with so I can pull them out easily. Now, this is the thing. I'm going to have to be feeling this as I go, because this fabric, as you can see, is wider than the foam, but I'm not interested in trimming it right now. I'm going to do that later. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the edge of that fabric. Let me just make sure this is get this all. Oh, there we go. There, that's better. So I'm literally putting the distance between the needle and the edge of this foot is 1/2 centimeter, or maybe a little more. So what I like to do is put the I know that this fabric is wider than the base underneath, so by doing it along the outside edge, I know I'm going to catch everything but not be too far in to all the layers, because I don't want the stitching that I'm putting in, even though I'm putting this in now, I'm also going to give this a wider stitch. I'm putting it up to 3, and see, now it's just moving a little quicker, and then I pull these pins out as we get close to the presser foot. I'm keeping the edge of this fabric. Now look at how far out this fabric is. You can see how far out that fabric is, but it's going to all get caught under there, so I'm good. But I'm just making sure. Now here's a pin I didn't flip around. That's not good. So bring that. And we just keep going. You can feel the edge of the thing. If it gets even further out, you can feel. You just adjust. It's all instinct. There's another pin that's in the back. See, this is why I don't like them on the wrong side, because it becomes fussy to pull the pins out. So I always make sure that the pins are on the... I try to anyway. Clearly I'm lying to you. I didn't do it this time. But I like to try and make sure that the pins are on the side I'm going to be pulling them out from. It just makes it easier. Now you see how this is hard because this point is going up and this whole head of the sewing machine is in the way. But because this is malleable, we can fold stuff, a little origami, never hurt anybody. Get my pin up, pull it out, move it along. And you're just doing it in sections anyway. I like to use my fingers as much as I can to just really double check that fabric is smooth. You can see I'm holding it. Now this is the hand of a sewer who's used to sewing. You might find it hard to try and organize everything in your hands and think about sewing and press the pedal and it's a lot. But when you're used to it, you start to be able to, your hands start knowing what they're doing before you do almost. So we're almost done. Look at this, all these pins. Here I said I moved them on the wrong side. And what, I only had 2 that were on the right side? Ugh, all right. Okay, so now we're coming to the end of this, and we just hit a little backspin. It doesn't have to be a lot, but I like to just create a security moment. And then we cut that, and then we, look at, there's another, there we go. Now, as you can see, there is all this extra fabric. So what I like to do now is, because here's my hat. This is the hat more or less. There's the shape, there's the inside. This is a little, sorry, there's the inside. Ooh, it's dirty. I put my fingers in here. But it's a little collapsy, but that's because we're going to be putting something in there anyway. But you can see it's fairly smooth around the edge. This is where we wanted it to be smooth. So now I'm just going to trim it to the foam part. I don't want to cut any of the foam or the other fabric away necessarily. I am just going right around this whole thing and just trimming the extra fabric away. I like to put wire into the edge of things because it helps me shape them. Sometimes, like, you can make an opening more oblong or more squat. You can curl, make things curl. I want this to curl. So what I'm going to do is zigzag some wire. This is the time to do this. Zigzag some wire onto the interior of this hat. This is floral wire. It's or craft wire. I got this at the Dollarama. Look at that. $1.25. Tons of it. Tons of it. Now this happens to be blue, which goes with the hat, but that's not. It doesn't matter. You're not going to see this. Now what I like to do, because I'm going to triple it up, because one of these is quite feeble, but 3 is good enough for a hat. So what I like to do is I put the 3, I hold them down here, and I just try and not braid them really. I'm braiding them. I'm braiding them. But I just like to kind of twist them together so that they don't roam. And then literally, once you get to the end, you can just twist them around each other, and then they're connected. They're yours forever. There. Just wrap it around like that. There. So now we have a nice bit of wire, and I'm going to put this wire. Now this is just however long that wire was. I don't even know if it's long enough to go around, but I think it's either just long enough or not. Yeah. So see, when this comes around, it's short by that much, which is okay. I don't need the wire down at this end, so what I'm going to do is take these two edges here, and then I pull the other end, and it just gives me like the natural kind of halfway point. So there's that. I'm just going to make that very, very sharp with my fingers. There. And now, do you see, it'll sit right in that corner, because I want this corner to curl. I want it to do a proper little floral curl. So now what we're going to do is, with our trusty sewing machine, is we're just going to zigzag this thread, this wire into this edge of the hat. So we want to go to our zigzag. I'm going to go down to a 1. No, sorry, that's a 2. Just below a 2. Two ticks below a 2. That's where we're going to be. Now again, this is just because we've trimmed this fabric, we know that this is the edge of the whole shebang. So we bring this under. Now this is going to be weird because you have wire here. Don't let it be weird. But again, by hand, you're going to just crank that down a little, move the wire over, and then, yeah. So you're just getting a sense of where the wire wants to be in relation to the zigzag. And then just, yeah, not too fast. You can just a couple, like you can go, and then readjust, and then no one's watching you sew. No, I know y'all are watching me sew, but that's different. But when you're sewing, don't be afraid of mistakes. Don't think it has to look a certain way or be a certain way. There are really no mistakes when you're making things like hats and that, because it's art and it's subjective. There are rules, balance and color and form and all sorts of things like that. But as far as the creative process, if you break your needles because you can't zigzag over wire, well, God, I bet you there are world leaders who can't zigzag over wire and they're okay with it. So you should be too. Keep in mind, I'm sewing all of this. You could hot glue gun. Every step here where I am sewing, you could be hot glue gunning. I'll do a hot glue gun hat tutorial next, I swear. It'll be a hoot. But now, once you've zigzagged the other side, just trim the excess away. Seriously. Now, we don't have the wire going all the way. It stops just on either side of here. But for this curve, I could get this curve to actually come back quite a bit if I wanted, but I actually like the height of it. I'd like it to kind of, so there. This whole edge where the wire is and the raw edges, this is very ugly. That's why we saved black fabric. Now, there's black in this, there's white in this. I thought white would be nice, but I think black is more universal. I could wear it with more. Now, the nice thing with dotted fabric is you can kind of cut along the dot lines. Now, if you wanted to, you could make a pattern piece for the hat trim. You could measure out exactly how wide you want it, but unless you're making more than one of these hats, trust me, this will be a one-off hat. The only reason that I did the paper pattern for the basic shape is because I needed 3 things cut: 2 layers of fabric and the foam. But as far as trim goes, you don't need that pattern. But if you were making, say, a bunch of these hats for something, then by all means, make a pattern piece. Seriously. What we're going to be doing here is sewing the fabric on. We're going to bring the right sides together, and then we're going to stitch probably a zipper, a presser foot width away. And then we're going to bring this around and over and catch it on the other side. So here we go. I'm just going to go slow. I don't want this hitting the wire and cracking. Now, normally what will happen if the needle hits a pin or a wire is it usually just kind of pushes it out of the way. But it depends on how cheap or expensive the pins are. Sometimes softer pins, the needle will actually snap them. So what I'm doing here is I've got the fabric right on the edge. Let me just bring this up a little higher for you so you can see what the hell I'm doing. There we go. I'm so insensitive. All right, so this is all, see all the raw edges, the wire. I can feel the wire. I can see that the wire is going under the presser foot. Now, as you're doing this, you'll see that the black fabric will start to buckle in front of the presser foot. It's just because it's a lot to go through. I'm not holding it in the back. And because it's stretchy, it will give a little. But as long as you don't pull it through, you should be fine. And then again, we have to manipulate this form to get it into the under here. Make sure all of our fabrics are aligned still. And then just go a little at a time, a little at a time. And you continue the whole way around. Now, my machine doesn't go, some machines go really fast. Some Husqvarnas, they have settings. You can change the speeds. I think a lot of machines have that now, but the last time I was on a Husqvarna, it had a turtle and a rabbit, and I was like, what the heck is that all about? And one was fast and one was slow. And I'll tell you, the fast was still not as fast as industrial machines can get. Oh, they are zippy beasts. And yes, Zippy Beast was my drag queen name in high school. All right, so I'm just going over the wire there, and I just want to make sure I didn't get the wire caught in the presser foot, so I raised it, just adjusted. Keep doing that. Whenever you have to raise your presser foot, if you ever have to do that, make sure your needle's in the fabric. Just make sure your needle's down in the fabric, and then you can do this all you want. Sometimes you have to change direction, things like that. Make sure your presser foot's in the fabric. It's just your last resort for making sure everything's where it needs to be. Now, as we're getting to the end of this, we're coming to where we started. There's this other fabric that we already sewed. Now, what's happening here is we are making an edge on the fabric. Do you see? So we're going to bring this around, which means that this is going to have to get tucked under as well. But it's going to be fussy, and I'm going to do it from the other side. So because we're coming up on this, I just have to hold that all by hand so that, oh, I keep hitting the tripod. I'm a beast. So I have to have that all prepped under here at the end, so when I sew over it, it's all ready to go. So that's what I was just doing there. And then we come to the end. Now remember, there's wire. The wire bends here, so we don't want anything to be too weird. So I'm just going to very carefully chukka, chukka, chukka. All right. And there we go. Okay, so now that we've got this all, this is where we ended. This is where it overlaps. So now we're going to take this edge, and we are just going to wrap this edge, and we're going to stitch it. We are literally just going to stitch this. It's called stitching in the ditch. We are literally, I'm just coming in closer here. We are literally going to be stitching beside this black fabric into the colorful fabric to trap this fabric in behind. This is very fussy. If you get frustrated by this, you're doing it right. But all you got to do is start slow and do it in sections. Don't rush. This is not... keep in mind, most of this kind of work is done by hand. And if you would rather do this sewing by hand, by all means, go to it. Because it might take longer, but you have way more control, and you're able to, it's less swearing. The machine will test you. Let me tell you what. All right. I also like to have a pin in my hand sometimes for this kind of thing, so I can literally hold things down as they go into the jaws of the machine to get stitched. I just like to make sure, if I can, that as much of this is secure. So yeah, whatever it takes. If you need to have, sometimes I'll use a seam ripper because it's a little more surface, but this way I know I can see that the needle is sewing into this black fabric, but I also know, because I've wrapped this around, that the black fabric is catching on the other side. And it's perfection. Just see. And not too fast. And the weird sounds you're hearing is the zipper, I mean the needle actually hitting the wire that's in the edge of this hat, but it's pushing it out of the way. You can actually hear it shift. So again, I'm going slow enough that this is not a huge issue. If you go slow enough, the needle will move a wire or a pin out of the way, but when you're zipping along, that's when all hell can break loose. All right. And then you just continue. This is just, we're covering all of our sins. This is the binding that'll help just make the hat look more finished. Oh, move the wire again. Thick, thick, bang, bang. And as we get to the end, I just want to make sure all of these threads are out of the way. And if I plan this exactly right, we should be able to cover the whole thing and be finished in one zippy slippy. Zippy slippy. All right, here we go. Now, I want to say that if when you're sewing stuff like this, you miss, like maybe you miss in the back. We're going to check in a second, because I have a feeling like up here at the back it's not going to catch, but I have a plan. Just go back a little. But anything that doesn't catch, you can just tack by hand. It's not a big deal. So I'm just going to clip those threads. Now, this is the end. As you can see, it didn't catch everything. So what I'm going to do here, there's my fabric, there's the end of it. I'm holding it all down. I'm just going to cut a little bit away. No, I'm not going to. I'm leaving it there. I'm folding this whole thing back around. And it's just going to come down just this little bit, just like that. There, can you see? And then that's going to secure all of the end of this hat. And I'm just going to sew straight across here, very slow. I'm hitting the wire, I can feel it, but it's all right. And then I'm going to just go back very slowly, 1 or 2 stitches back. Oop, 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 oop. There. And that's that. We're going to trim all of our threads back. And then we have all of this excess fabric here. What I like to do is just get right up near the stitching, trim it off. It's gone. Got a couple of threads, trim, trim. And this, more or less, is my hat. And there, more or less, is our hat. I know it doesn't look like much because there's still a few things we have to do. We have to dress it with our feature item, the feather. But before we even do that, we need to have a look at this. This is why I like to have the hair that I'm going to be wearing a hat with, so I can see where the hat needs to go. Because sometimes you put it in the wrong way and it just doesn't look right. Now, I wanted this to come down. I thought it would be fun to have that over an eye or something very, very dramatique, which I do. But I have to say, the more I've been playing with this curl, look at, and this is because of the wire. Do you see how lovely that is? We can get that to literally go anywhere, do anything. But I thought because of that curl, it would be fun to have it go up like that. I think that that's a fun shape as well. So because I've not done a hat like that, we're going to do it that way for this. So what we need is we need to put our feather in. So I'm just going to stick it in here, and I'm going to pin it just for now. I just want it to not move around in there. And now, that's quite hideous. It looks like, you know, so because this is wrapped chicken feathers, like they every time you bend it, it creates more shapes. So what I think we need to do here is almost create, if I bend it in a circle, it might make, oh look, like a star or a, oh yeah, look, that's fun. Yeah, I like that. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to get our sewing needle and we're just going to whip stitch this to here. And then when I'm done, I'm going to pin this to this wig. This is how we're going to wear this one. But if you were not wanting to pin it to your own head, there are a couple of things you can do. If you took some of this trim and did like a little loop of fabric here and a little loop of fabric at the back, you could put bobby pins in and pin it into your hair. Or if you wanted to, at the midpoint, I would take an elastic and just something so that it kind of holds it in the center. And then what you would do is, as you were getting ready, you would have your hairdo. You might have to separate out a layer of your hair, lift it up to get the elastic under, and then that. I would still, on any hat, whether it's going on your hair or a wig, I would do loops anyway, just to attach it to the wig directly. Because unless you're pinning it, or to the hair, especially the hair, unless you pin it to the wig, it's gonna travel at some point, especially if you like to do a little hairography up in the club. Are the kids even still saying, I don't know. Well, there's my first tutorial on how to make a hat. Well, how to make this hat. I hope it wasn't too long, said your last boyfriend. Also, please forgive the camera angles, said the actress to the bishop. It's the first one. They'll get better, and if they don't, well, what the hell else were you doing? I'm so serious. If you have questions, please leave them down below. Also, don't forget to like this video if you did. Don't forget to subscribe. If you want to support me, you can tip me through PayPal, you can support me on Patreon, or you can buy merchandise from Redbubble. All the links are down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. If there's anything that I left out or something you're not clear on, ask me. I will answer it. And until next time, miss me. Mwah. Seriously. Woo.